Vladimir Putin's Russia has drawn a lot of attention lately, especially regarding his invasion of Ukraine. But what makes Putin so powerful? What makes him stay in power for so long? And why should we care? Let's get started. The corridors of the Kremlin have always been steeped in history. But the moment you step inside under Vladimir Putin's rule, the air feels heavier, more calculated, as if every wall has ears and every shadow hides a secret. From the very beginning of his rise in 1999, when a relatively unknown former KGB officer was appointed prime minister, there was a sense that this was not a leader who would simply follow the traditional script of Russian politics. He emerged in a Russia that was still stumbling from the chaos of the 1990s, where oligarchs flaunted their wealth, regions pushed for independence, and the average citizen was tired of uncertainty. Putin understood the mood of the people and the fragility of the system he was about to inherit. He knew that survival in Russian politics required more than just popularity, demanded absolute control over the levers of power. His first step was to take command of the narrative, ensuring that television, newspapers, and later digital media would speak with a unified voice. In Russia, television remained the most powerful tool of influence, and by the early 2000s, all major networks were either state-owned or under the influence of Kremlin-friendly oligarchs. This meant that the image of Putin projected to the public was carefully curated. A strong leader, decisive commander, a man who restored dignity to a humiliated nation. Dissenting voices were pushed to the margins, labeled as foreign agents, or silenced entirely through a mix of legal pressure and fear. This was not accidental. It was the first layer of a playbook designed to make his leadership seem both inevitable and irreplaceable. The second move was to strengthen the security apparatus, building loyalty within the military, police, and intelligence agencies. His background in the KGB gave him not only the understanding of how these systems worked, but also the respect of those inside them. Under his rule, budgets for the security services expanded, their powers widened, and their leaders became some of his most trusted allies. Loyalty was rewarded with influence and wealth. Betrayal was met with swift consequences. By ensuring that the guardians of the state were personally invested in his survival, he reduced the possibility of a coup or rebellion from within. Economics was his third front. In the early 2000s, Russia's economy grew rapidly, thanks to rising oil and gas prices. Putin seized this opportunity, using energy as both a domestic stabilizer and a foreign policy weapon. Domestically, higher wages and pensions created the sense that life was improving under his rule, even if the wealth gap remained. Internationally, gas pipelines became a means of exerting pressure on neighboring countries and even parts of Europe. Energy contracts controlled through state companies were tools of both diplomacy and leverage, ensuring that many foreign leaders thought twice before crossing Moscow too directly. While economic stability won him loyalty at home, the consolidation of political power was never far from his mind. Regional governors, once elected and relatively independent, were brought under tighter Kremlin control. The structure of elections changed, political opposition was fractured, and parties that could challenge his dominance were either co-opted or dismantled. In the rare cases where opposition figures gained traction, their campaigns faced sudden legal troubles, media blackouts, or administrative barriers that made genuine competition impossible. The system became one where elections still happened, but the outcome was rarely in doubt. One of the most effective parts of his strategy was the careful cultivation of a personal image. The public saw Putin not just as a politician, but as a symbol of stability, strength, and national pride. Whether it was riding a horse shirtless in Siberia, diving into the depths of Lake Baikal, or playing ice hockey, these public displays were meant to reinforce the idea of vitality and confidence. Each image was deliberate, feeding into a narrative of a man who was both a leader and a protector of Russia's destiny. For many citizens, even those critical of certain policies, this symbolism carried weight. Yet survival at the top also meant controlling potential rivals before they became threats. Putin's inner circle was carefully balanced, with no single figure gaining enough influence to challenge his position. When ambitious figures did emerge, they were either brought closer and absorbed into his network, or pushed out entirely. This constant balancing act ensured that no faction within the Kremlin could unite against him. It was a method that required constant vigilance, but paid off by keeping political turbulence at bay. Foreign policy played a dual role in his playbook, both as a means to project power abroad and to reinforce his legitimacy at home. Military interventions, such as in Georgia in 2008, Crimea in 2014, and Syria in 2015, were presented domestically as necessary actions to protect Russian interests and resist Western aggression. These moves often triggered sanctions and criticism from abroad. But within Russia, they boosted his image as a leader who would stand up to anyone. Every conflict, every standoff with the West, became part of a larger story, that of Russia reclaiming its rightful place as a great power. Managing public perception in times of crisis was another hallmark of his rule. Economic downturns, international isolation, and internal protests were framed not as failures of leadership, but as the result of external enemies seeking to weaken Russia. This narrative created a rally around the flag effect, where criticism of the state was equated with betrayal. Even when discontent surfaced, it was often fragmented, with no central movement strong enough to pose a real challenge. The state's grip on media and public space ensured that opposition voices struggled to find a national platform. Over the years, constitutional changes extended his potential time in office far beyond the traditional limits. These changes were often presented as necessary for stability, giving the impression that without his leadership, Russia might slip back into the chaos of the past. Referendums and parliamentary votes gave these moves a veneer of legitimacy. Even as critics pointed out the ways the process was controlled from the start, by combining legal mechanisms with political dominance, he turned the rules of the system into tools for his own survival. The result is a political environment where Putin's presence is constant, his influence deeply embedded in every institution that matters. From the parliament to the courts, from the military to the media, his reach is evident. He has built a network of loyalty that is not just personal, but systemic, making it difficult to imagine a Russia without him. For supporters, this is a source of reassurance. For opponents, it is a sign of how thoroughly one man can shape a nation's destiny. Yet the playbook is not just about power, it is about timing. Putin has mastered the art of knowing when to push forward and when to step back, when to confront and when to negotiate. He uses unpredictability as a weapon, keeping both allies and adversaries uncertain of his next move. This unpredictability, coupled with a deep understanding of Russia's history and psyche, has allowed him to maintain his grip for more than 2 decades. In the end, the survival of any leader in such a position depends on adapting the rules as circumstances change. For now, the strategies that brought him to power continue to keep him there. The combination of media control, security, loyalty, economic leverage, political engineering, and symbolic strength has created a system where his leadership feels less like an option and more like an inevitability. Whether history will view this as a period of stability or a time of lost opportunity is a question that will be answered long after the final chapter of his rule is written. Thank you for watching this video. Please do share your opinions in the comment section below. Your comments really help us improve our videos. We will see you in the next video. Till then, stay tuned.